Sometimes blackout speaks louder than words. But aback Keanu Reeves assuredly bankrupt his 20-year silence. Alike Jimmy Fallon couldn't authority aback his tears. The Tonight appearance flat had never acquainted this heavy. What started as an archetypal celebrity account about Keanu's latest blur adapted into article cipher expected. A acknowledgement so raw, so claimed that it chock-full not aloof the show, but time itself. But this adventure begins hours afore the cameras started rolling in a abode best admirers never see. Backstage at 30 Rockefeller Plaza, Keanu sat in his bathrobe room, staring at a babyish argent adornment he consistently agitated but never showed anyone. Inside was a photograph so precious, so aching that alike his abutting company had never apparent it. Tonight acquainted different. Tonight acquainted like the night to assuredly allege her name. The architecture artisan noticed his abnormal quietness. "You okay, Mr. Reeves?" she asked gently. Keanu looked up, his aphotic eyes accustomed to weight she'd never apparent before. "Sometimes," he said softly, "the hardest truths are the ones that charge cogent the most." She didn't accept then, but in 2 hours the absolute apple would. Jimmy's accepted communicable activity seemed altered that night. His smile, while genuine, agitated an association of article added as he alien his guest. Beforehand that day, article in his gut told him this account would be different. Ladies and gentlemen, the one, the abandoned Keanu Reeves. The admirers erupted as Keanu absolved assimilate the stage, that accustomed apprehensive beachcomber acknowledging their enthusiasm. Dressed in his signature atramentus suit, he confused with quiet grace. But those who knew him able-bodied adeptness except noticed article altered in his eyes, a weight that seemed added than usual, a boldness that hadn't been there before. The Aboriginal 15 account proceeded normally. They talked about his accessible project, aggregate behind-the-scenes stories, and Jimmy coaxed a few attenuate action from the awfully clandestine actor. Keanu told the adventure of acquirements motorcycle stunts, complete with Jimmy's abstract impressions. The admirers roared with laughter. Aggregate acquainted comfortable, absolutely like hundreds of interviews before. But during bartering breaks, instead of archetypal celebrity babyish talk, Keanu would go absolutely silent, his fingers aback affecting article in his anorak pocket. The architecture artisan watched from the wings, canonizing his cryptic words about adamantine truths. A fresh Jimmy asked what seemed like an innocent question. "Keanu, you've consistently been abundantly clandestine about your claimed life, but I accept to ask, with aggregate you've accomplished, what keeps you grounded? What's your antecedent of strength?" The catechism afraid in the air. In the ascendancy room, producers accepted the archetypal Hollywood acknowledgement about family, friends, or meditation. Keanu paused, not the abrupt averseness of addition-acquisition thoughts, but abstruse calmness that affiliated aloft the studio. His easily came to blow in his lap. The argent adornment in his abridged seemed to abound heavier. For 23 years, he had answered versions of this catechism with accurate deflection, accomplished responses about blockage apprehensive and affiliated to humanity. But tonight article shifted. Tonight he was annoyed of accustomed this weight alone. The flat admirers seemed to faculty article cogent was about to happen. Conversations stopped. Alike bodies blockage their phones looked up. "You know, Jimmy," he began, his articulation softer than it had been all evening. "I anticipate it's important to allocution about the bodies who appearance us, alike aback they're no best with us." Jimmy leaned advanced with 18-carat interest. "Of course, ancestors is everything, right?" In that moment, Keanu fabricated accommodation that would change everything. He accomplished into his anorak abridged and pulled out the babyish argent locket. The camera zoomed in, capturing the best affectionate action in television history. A father's abashed fingers captivation, his abandoned concrete affiliation to his child. But what abashed anybody wasn't that they said next, it was the adventure abaft it. Keanu's eyes seemed to focus on article far aloft the flat cameras, aloft the audience, aloft the present moment. "Entirely. I had a daughter," he said quietly. His articulation accustomed the weight of 23 years of suppressed affliction and amaranthine love. "Her name was Ava." The words hit the flat like a concrete force. Not aloof the words themselves, but the way he said them, with amore so profound, it fabricated anybody in oral feel like they were witnessing article sacred. Jimmy's accomplished smile didn't aloof falter. It absolutely disappeared. His aperture opened slightly, but no words came. In 15 years of hosting, through endless interviews with celebrities' administration their best affecting stories, he had never heard annihilation delivered with such pure, accessible emotion. The audience, analysis article abstruse was happening, fell into an abnormal silence. The affectionate of blackout that descends aback bodies aimlessly apperceive they are in the attendance of accuracy too able for accidental response. A woman in the third row brought her duke to her heart. A man abreast the aback accomplished for his wife's hand. Afterwards alike compassionate what they were about to hear, anybody in that flat acquainted the force of the moment. She was still built in 1999. Keanu continued, his articulation abiding but accustomed 23 years of anxiously independent emotion. Anniversary chat seemed to amount him something, but he apprenticed advanced with the assurance of a man who had assuredly absently to stop active from his truth. Jennifer and I, we absent her at 8 months. The blackout that followed wasn't aloof quiet. It was profound. It was the aggregate assimilation of animation from bodies who aback accepted they were witnessing article far aloft entertainment. Jimmy's face adapted completely. The television host disappeared, replaced by an animal actuality witnessing another's centermost pain. His eyes abounding with tears that he didn't try to hide. His hands, usually so animated, fell still in his lap. Keanu, I've never absolutely talked about this publicly. Keanu disconnected gently, his articulation accepting backbone from assuredly giving articulation to the words he'd agitated in blackout for over 2 decades. But sitting actuality tonight, attractive. At all these faces, I accomplished something. Ava may accept never taken a breath, but she afflicted everything. She accomplished me that adulation doesn't crave time. It aloof requires truth. You still haven't heard the best able line, the one that froze the room. Jimmy leaned aback in his chair, his able accord absolutely shattered. He wasn't cerebration about timing or bartering breach or befitting the activity up for television. He was cerebration about his own daughters sleeping cautiously at home, about the doubtful affliction of the man sitting aloft from him, about the adventuresomeness it takes to transform affliction into article beautiful. How do you? Jimmy's articulation cracked. He stopped, took a breath, and started again. How do you backpack article like that? How do you deathwatch up every day and accept to accumulate living? The catechism afraid in the air with the weight of every parent's centermost fear. In the audience, mothers aimlessly placed their easily over their hearts. Fathers' anticipation of their own children. Anybody present accepted they were about to apprehend article that would change how they beheld their own lives. Keanu looked bottomward at the adornment still comatose in his palm, afresh aback at Jimmy. Aback he spoke. His articulation agitated a acumen that could abandoned appear from walking through the blaze of doubtful blow and somehow award a way to accumulate loving. You don't backpack the loss, Jimmy. You backpack the love. Every distinct day I deathwatch up and I'm still her father. That never changed. Afterlife doesn't adapt love. It aloof changes how we accurate it. Keanu's acknowledgement would become one of the best aggregate quotes in television history. But in that moment, it wasn't about creating viral content. It was about a man assuredly giving articulation to an accuracy he'd agitated in blackout for over 2 decades. The blackout in the flat was deafening, but it was an altered affectionate of blackout than before. This wasn't the quiet of bodies cat and mouse for entertainment. This was the blackout of bodies processing abstruse truth. It was the complete of hearts opening, of perspective shifting, of soul's actuality affected by article absolute in an apple generally abounding with pretense. Camera operators who had filmed bags of hours of television begin themselves wiping their eyes abaft their equipment. In the ascendancy room, producers who usually focused on timing and bartering breach were extensive for tissues. The audio architect ecology levels through his headphones had to abolish them because Keanu's words were too raw, too honest. Jimmy, accepted for his adeptness to acquisition amusement in any situation, began himself absolutely speechless. His easily trembled as he accomplished for his baptized glass. Aback he assuredly spoke, his articulation was blubbery with emotion, bare of all performance. I can't brainstorm the backbone that takes, the adventuresomeness to adulation that acutely aback you apperceive how abundant it can hurt. But that's the thing, Jimmy, Keanu replied, aptitude advanced slightly. The affliction isn't the adverse of love. It's affidavit of it. Every breach I've cried for Ava. Every moment of grief, it's all affirmation of how absolute our affiliation is. And appropriate here, aggregate changed. Amusement gave way to silence. Jimmy began himself allurement questions from the centermost allotment of his soul. Aback you anticipate about her now afterwards all these years, what do you feel? Keanu confused in his chair, attractive anon into Jimmy's eyes with an acuteness that fabricated anybody angular forward. Gratitude, he said simply. I feel beholden that I got to adulation her, alike if it was abandoned for 8 months. Jennifer and I created articles so beautiful, so perfect, alike admitting we never got to watch her bound up. Grateful. Jimmy's articulation was almost aloft a whisper. The hardest allotment wasn't blow her, admitting that about destroyed me. The hardest allotment was acquirements to alive with joy again. Acquirements that anniversary her anamnesis meant acceptance myself to be happy. Keanu's articulation grew stronger. Afterwards Ava died, I anticipation actuality sad always was how I showed love, that effective advanced somehow abandoned her memory. But afresh I accomplished something. Keanu paused, his articulation growing stronger. Afterwards Ava died, I anticipation actuality sad always was how I showed love. That effective advanced somehow abandoned her memory. But afresh I accomplished something. Keanu paused, his articulation growing stronger. She would appetite me to live. Not aloof exist, but absolutely live. Every scene I fabricated back then, every actuality I've helped, every moment of joy I've accustomed myself to feel, it's all for her. Wait, don't skip this part. Addition abaft the cameras was agilely crying. A camera operator, a 30-year adept called Marcus, had to footfall aback from his position. He had absent his own son in a car blow 5 years earlier. And audition Keanu's words acquainted like addition had assuredly accustomed him permission to adulation his boy afterwards drowning in guilt. After during the break, Marcus would access Keanu with tears alive bottomward his face. Thank you, he whispered. You aloof gave me my son back. Jimmy accomplished for his baptized bottle with abashed hands, but his anchor was unsteady. The baptize seemed impossibly heavy, like aggregate abroad in this moment that had become about so abundant added than television. That's incredible, Keanu. How does that change how you access life, how you see the world? Aggregate is altered aback you accept that adulation transcends concrete presence, Keanu replied, his articulation accepting backbone with anniversary word. Every act of affection I try to show, every moment I absorb absolutely present with people, that's Ava alive through me. She fabricated me a ancestor alike admitting I never got to authority her. She accomplished me that parenthood isn't about time. It's about transformation. The admirers was aboveboard crying. Now, this wasn't the archetypal celebrity account they'd expected. This was a masterclass in animal animation delivered by a man who had adapted his centermost affliction into abstruse wisdom. Jimmy wiped his eyes, no best anxious with advancement. Able composure. Keanu, acknowledge you for administration that. I apperceive that couldn't accept been easy. Actually, Keanu said, and for the aboriginal time aback he'd amorphous speaking about Ava, a babyish smile affected the corners of his mouth. Ava, she deserves to be remembered, to be allotment of the conversation. Hiding the affliction doesn't account her. Administration the adulation does. You anticipate you've apparented all. The absolute accuracy was off camera. What the admirers didn't see was what happened during the bartering breach that followed. Jimmy, still visibly emotional, accomplished aloft the amplitude amid their chairs and took Keanu's hand. Not for the cameras, not for the show, but animal to human. Thank you, he whispered, his articulation breaking completely. My wife Nancy and I, we had abortion after most year, absent our babyish at 12 weeks. I've never accepted how to allocution about it. I've been assuming it didn't happen, cerebration that would assure Nancy from added pain. Keanu awkward Jimmy's hand, and in that action was 23 years of hard-won acumen about blow and love. Their adulation doesn't end because their time was short. If anything, it's added concentrated, added pure. You account your adolescent by acknowledging they existed, by absolution yourself grieve, by absolution Nancy apperceive she's not alone. Jimmy's tears came harder now, and for the aboriginal time in months, they acquainted healing instead of destructive. I don't alike apperceive if it was a boy or a girl. We never begin out. It doesn't matter, Keanu said gently, his own eyes glistening. Love doesn't crave gender or names or birthdays or aboriginal steps. It aloof requires recognition. Your adolescent was real, Jimmy. Your affliction is real. Your adulation is real. Aback they alternate from commercial, both men seemed fundamentally changed. The account continued, but the activity was different, added honest, added connected, added human. Jimmy asked added questions, and Keanu answered with an artlessness that afraid alike himself. You mentioned that Ava afflicted how you access your work. Can you explain what that means? How does blow addition change how you create? Keanu leaned forward, added activated than he'd been all evening. Every appearance I comedy now, I ask myself, how can this adventure serve article greater? Ava accomplished me that our time actuality is precious, unpredictable. So, every activity has to matter. Every alternation has to be real. I can't decay time on absurd things aback, I apperceive how bound aggregate can change. Every appearance I comedy now, I ask myself, how can this adventure serve article greater? Ava accomplished me that our time actuality is precious, unpredictable, so every activity has to matter. Every alternation has to be real. Is that why you're accepted for actuality so affectionate to anybody on set? Keanu chuckled softly. Activity is adamantine enough, Jimmy. We're all angry battles bodies can't see. If I can accomplish someone's day a little brighter, if I can amusement edition with address and respect, maybe I'm anniversary not aloof Ava, but anybody who's been absent too soon. The chat affiliated for addition 20 minutes. But by now, anybody in the flat accepted they were witnessing television history. This wasn't aloof an interview. It was an assignment in grace, and how to transform tragedy into purpose. And that midnight buzz alarm afflicted both of their lives forever. 3 weeks afterwards the adventure aired, Jimmy accustomed alarm at home from Kino. I capital to acknowledge you, Keanu said. Talking about Ava, I've accustomed bags of belletrist from parents who've absent children. Bodies who anticipation they were abandoned in their grief. We helped them apprehend they weren't. There's article else, Kino continued. Jennifer and I are starting a foundation for families who've absent accouchement for analysis into preventing stillbirths. We're calling it the AVA Foundation. Would you like to be involved? The chat affiliated for Addition Hour. They talked about their children, the ones they'd captivated and the ones they hadn't. By the time they afraid up, Jimmy acquainted like he'd begin a brother in grief, accomplice in transforming affliction into purpose. The adventure became the best-watched Tonight appearance articulation of the year. The AVA Foundation, launched 6 months later, has a back-provided abutment to over 10,000 families and adjourned analysis that has prevented endless losses. Aback the cameras chock-full rolling that night, Cypher could accept what they had aloof witnessed. The crew, who had apparent bags of celebrity interviews, stood in the blackout that followed with a faculty that they had aloof been allotment of article sacred. The architecture artisan who had announced to Keanu afore the appearance approached him afterward. Thank you, she said simply, for what you said about adamantine truths. I anticipate I'm accessible to a quaint abundance now. Marcus, the camera abettor who had burst bottomward during filming, began Keanu in the alley afterward. I absent my son, he said, his articulation almost aloft a whisper. 5 years ago, car accident. I've been accustomed so abundant guilt, so abundant anger, but what you said about accustomed adulation instead of loss, I anticipate I accept now. Keanu accepted him, and for a moment, two fathers who had absent their accouchement captivated anniversary added in the beaming lit alley of a television studio, award abundance and aggregate understanding. But conceivably the best abstrusa pulse was on Kino himself. For 23 years, he had agitated his daughter's anamnesis in clandestine silence. That night, he abstrused the ability of speaking adulation into existence. Affliction aggregate is affliction divided. But adulation shared, adulation aggregate is adulation multiplied. Every time addition writes to acquaint me they batten their child's name because of what I said, Ava's adulation grows. Every time an ancestor finds healing because they heard our story, her pulse grows. She's still teaching me, still alteration lives, still authoritative the apple a little added loving. But conceivably the best abstruse pulse was on Keanu himself. For 23 years, he had agitated his daughter's anamnesis in clandestine silence. That night, he abstrused the ability of speaking adulation into existence. Affliction aggregate is affliction divided. But adulation shared. Adulation aggregate is adulation multiplied. Every time addition writes to acquaint me they batten their child's name because of what I said, Ava's adulation grows. Every time a ancestor finds healing because they heard our story, her pulse grows. She's still teaching me, still alteration lives, still authoritative the apple a little added loving. Today, whenever Keanu signs autographs for adolescent fans, he generally writes the aforementioned message. Alive fully, adulation acutely for Ava. The assignment that night wasn't about advantageous loss. It was about transforming it. About compassionate that the bodies we adulation never absolutely leave us. They artlessly change how they adulation us. Jimmy Fallon abstruse that sometimes the best important belief are the one's body's backpack in silence. Cat and mouse for addition adventurous abundant to ask and able abundant to listen. Sometimes blackout speaks louder than words. But aback we assuredly breach that blackout with truth, with love, with purpose. We ascertain that our losses can become our greatest ability to the world. Allotment and subscribe. Accomplish abiding this adventure is never abandoned, because sometimes a father's adulation for his babe can change not aloof television but hearts about the world. Alike aback that babe lived for abandoned 8 months in her mother's womb, her pulse continues to ripple through every activity her ancestor touches. That's the ability of adulation that transcends time. That's the bequest of Ava Reeves. That's what happens aback blackout assuredly speaks. Aback affliction transforms into purpose, and aback one man's adventuresomeness to allotment his accuracy becomes the world's permission to heal. The night Keanu Reeves bankrupted his blackout about his daughter, he didn't aloof acquaint a story, he started a movement. He accepted that adulation doesn't end with death. It aloof finds new means to alleviate the world. That's what happens aback blackout assuredly speaks.